Well, hi everybody, it's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we get together on a weekly basis and tackle things from the world of football we thought were interesting. I'm Tom Rennie, host of the football show on Sirius XM FC and TalkSport's international editor. I never give myself a billing, so I'm doing it now. Alongside me is MLS legend, Apple broadcaster, TNT broadcaster, Sirius XM FC broadcaster, and regional champion Harry Maguire lookalike contest 7 years in a row. It's Brian Dunny Dunseth. Hi, mate. You all right?
Okay, it gives me my opportunity to make my Star Trek joke about you being Jean-Luc Picard once again. Although in space in the future, I was under the assumption that there were no more bolts.
So, earlier on today, you tried to jibe me back on this one.
I felt good about it.
See, to you, though, being compared to Harry Maguire, for some reasons insulting. I don't know why. Harry Maguire's a legendary player, a Man United legend. He's a statue-worthy player. Imagine the compliment you're giving me, comparing me to Sir Patrick Stewart, Jean-Luc Picard himself. This is like, you don't insult someone with a compliment. You don't go, oh yeah, well your is massive, do you? As an insult, Tim? You know? Yeah, okay.
Well, how about this?
Yeah, go on.
I actually realized, because somebody sent it to me on during our show on Counterattack with Tony Miola. You know where this is going. Yeah, go on. You are a spitting image of the guy, the Man United fan that hasn't cut his hair for like 2 years. The guy who refuses to cut his hair until they win like, what, 4 games in a row? If you shaved his head and made him bald, he would look exactly like you.
I did think that was interesting when you sent me that earlier on. I did think that.
Margins are very slim.
But also, I would say that we're never going to find out, because they're never going to win 5 games in a row.
Point.
And so we'll never, ever discover it, sadly.
Yeah.
Right, loads to get through on our podcast today. As ever, before we get into it, we know we have more listeners to this podcast than people who are subscribed to us on YouTube. We know that as a fact. I have the numbers. Metaphorically, not literally, but I've seen the numbers. So we have more listeners to this podcast around the world, in the USA, weirdly in Russia, places across the Caribbean and South America as well. We love you all, and we thank you for your time listening to us. We know there are other podcasts out there, so we thank you. However, subscribe on YouTube as well, because we get money off that and all. So subscribe on YouTube, subscribe as a podcast, search for Week in the Tackle, and you have a challenge this week, because a friend of mine went to the FIFA World Cup draw a couple of days ago, and he came back and I was talking about it, and there's a couple of stories I'll tell you, but I can't do it on the podcast. Yeah. But he was like, oh, by the way, some guy came up to him at the Kennedy Center, where it was in DC, really snowy, and he said, like, oh, he works for me at Premier League Live, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, oh, he also does that podcast, Week in the Tackle, with Dunny. And like, my mate was like, oh, yeah, I think so. My friend clearly doesn't listen to the podcast, but basically, someone came up to a friend of mine who was covering it and was like, oh, I love Week in the Tackle. You should subscribe.
Hey, friend.
So there you go. Hi, friend from the Kennedy Center who listens to this program. Keep spreading the good word. Hope you told the president about it. Imagine he was like, I heard a podcast.
Actually decent.
Someone told me about it at the Kennedy Center. This Brian Dunny Dunseth. I don't know. It's very liberal. I become like an old queen, which some would say is very accurate. Wow. Anyway, if Tim was really here today, he'd be doing it's amazing, but he won't do it on air. So I've gone for it. Anyway, subscribe on. He wants to be fair. Yeah. That wasn't offensive. That was complimentary. Subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Spotify, subscribe on Apple, and tell your friends, whether you're at the Kennedy Center or otherwise. There's kind of 2 big topics for us this week. There's a couple of other little tidbits we might get to, but there's 2 big things that we might do a half and half show on. I want to do MLS Cup final because you were there, and of course, there's so many great storylines from that, from Inter Miami, the legacy of Inter Miami, David Beckham's whole arc to get to this point, Busquets and Alba.
I was on the field. Yeah, I was on the field, man. I got a lot of stuff to tell you.
So I do want to talk about that, but I do also think this other story, this Salah story, is probably the biggest story in the world right now. So I do want to start with that, if you don't mind, because, wow, this was incredible. Absolutely incredible. Mo Salah absolutely burning the boats at Liverpool. Most of you will know the context. I'll go real brief because I want to get your view on it, but in case you don't, Liverpool draw 3-3 with Leeds United at the weekend. Mo Salah does not come on the field. Most of that was down to Kamikaze Kanate, but maybe we'll save that for another day.
Tactics, yeah.
Awful. But, Salah don't come on. Full-time whistle. We did think it was a bit weird where he goes over to Liverpool fans, Salah, and he's doing like a solo applause to them, like he's leaving. And everyone's like, oh, that's a bit weird, isn't it? And then Mo Salah, who doesn't speak to the press, impromptu, because he's a superstar, goes into the mix zone. Now, again, you know the mix zone, Dunny, but again, for those that don't, it's like a corridor going from changing room to coach, and usually a Premier League player is obliged by the media team to go over and give some quotes to the gathered media. Mo Salah, seemingly prompted by nobody, walks over to the mix zone with, weirdly, the guy in a yellow lanyard, the Liverpool press officer, behind him. So, yeah, good luck with that on Monday,
Did you see his
mate.
body language? Oh,
my God, he's still talking. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And in the end, you can't do anything. Salah sort of took over. And he goes over to a rando journalist from Viaplay, no offence, and starts unloading. So a few key quotes. Number one, I said many times before that I have a good relationship with the manager, and all of a sudden, we don't have any relationship. I don't know why, but it seems to me, how I see it, that someone doesn't want me in the club. It seems like the club has thrown me under the bus. That is how I'm feeling. I think it's clear that someone wanted to get me to get all of the blame. I don't have to go every day fighting for my position because I earned it. I am not bigger than anyone, but I earned my position. It's football. It is what it is. I don't accept the situation. I've done so much for this club. And one more, I remember a while ago, now doing an anecdote, I remember a while ago, Harry Kane was not scoring for 10 games. Everyone in the media was like, oh, Harry will score for sure. When it comes to Mo, everyone is like, he needs to be on the bench. I'm sorry, Harry. A select group of quotes.
Oh my God. Yeah.
From an incredible freewheeling press conference. Dunny, give us your thoughts.
So
tell me what you think of this.
I've been thinking about this quite a bit. And listen, I go back to the Sadio Mane situation a few years ago. Kind of him or me type of feel. I go back to, remember when Liverpool had those ugly white and green uniforms, and Mo Salah was on the sideline getting set to be a substitute, and Jurgen Klopp's like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And Mo Salah did this, and you could tell he was visibly upset about not starting. Calendar year ago, Mo Salah did this. This isn't out of the ordinary. He did it about his contract. He did the same exact thing. Walked right past the media scrum, walked right up, and started talking about his situation because he wanted to make it about him. Mo Salah has scored 350-some goals and 420-some appearances. Last year, 29 goals and 25 assists. He was incredible. He earned that contract extension. This year, he's got 4 goals and 2 assists in all comps. If Mo Salah would have been in a Liverpool side, not starting, with 3 consecutive losses, this would have hit hard. I think he would have had a leg to stand on. But the reality is in the last 3 games, they haven't lost. And let's dumb it down to its simplest terms. Arne Slot's Liverpool goes up 2-0, concedes 2 goals, then gets the 3rd. And he looks down the bench and man, defensively, we haven't been great this game. You know what? Daniel Farke and Leeds United, they're about to throw on their last offensive subs. Let's try to close this game out. Let's try to hold on for a win. Let's try to figure out not to concede. That wasn't a game for Mo Salah. And by the way, the second 45 minutes against Sunderland, his legs, his burst, his running, closing down speed, all of that, it looks a little bit different. Not drastically different, but it looks a little bit different. So maybe all things can be true, right? Maybe when you think about Luis Diaz, maybe you think about Diogo Jota, rest in peace. What do you think about Darwin Nunez? Maybe you think about Trent Alexander-Arnold going out. Maybe Trent Alexander-Arnold had a bigger role in the success for Mo Salah than people want to give him credit for. Then you think about Ekitike. Then you think about Isak. Then you think about Wirtz. Then you think about Frimpong. You think about questions. Kirkes, by the way, Andy Robertson hasn't complained. You think about a midfield duo and trying to figure out what's the best position for Szoboszlai. Who the hell's going to play right back and actually put in the performance that's needed at right back? All of these things can also be true. So in this moment, why does it always happen to me was a quote that stood out. He said Mo, 3rd person, 3 occasions.
Weird. That was weird. Yeah.
Yeah. And then every day, my performance, I've earned my position. Talking about the past performances to the current performance. And when you're going to talk about the manager like that I had a relationship and now I don't have a relationship, you're saying that you don't have a relationship because he's not starting you? Listen, I love him as a player. I still think at 33 years of age, he's one of the elite players in the game. Is he as elite as he was back in 2018-19 when he was worth 180 million? Probably not. But at this stage of the season, if he's, and again, this happens to players all the time. It happened to myself. It's happened to every single player. There's a cult of personality that you are undroppable. You are the guy. It doesn't matter what you do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because come Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you are elite amongst the group. You are iconic within the group. Because of your presence, and I used this analogy a couple of months ago with Luis Suarez being in the team for Inter Miami, even though he wasn't doing the same Luis Suarez things, people will use your presence as a concern. I got Mo on the left. Sorry, Tim. Like, I got to be a little bit tighter. I got to be a little bit closer. Like, I know what he can do. I got to be able to close down. Like, just your presence alone causes concern for the way that the teams, that teams approach you. So at the end of the day, the timing's intentional. The decision is intentional. So now the pressure is on the manager, Arne Slot, who, by the way, I played for Thomas Rongen, my first professional coach, Dutch manager, very honest. I remember asking questions I didn't necessarily want the answers to, and I got the answers I didn't really want the answers to that question. I can remember the first time I watched the video and he absolutely filleted me. I was like, damn, that was kind of mean. That was kind of vicious. That was kind of malicious. And I realized I had to change the way that I was accepting constructive criticism because it was harsh constructive criticism. There was no gentleness. So for Arne Slot, and by the way, as of recording, Mo Salah is left off the travel trip for Liverpool, going to Inter Milan for Champions League football. He made the right decision because God forbid he allows something like this to go untethered.
Yeah.
What happens when he drops Virgil van Dijk? What happens when he drops Alisson? What happens when he drops Alexander Isak or one of these other newer players? Then they're all going to use that as a data point and go like, hold on a second. You're going to hold me accountable right now? When you allowed him to do that? At the end of the day, Mo Salah, he's in that statue conversation outside of Anfield because of what he's done for the club. He is elite among the elite in the history of Liverpool Football Club. There's no doubt about that in my mind. But there also comes a moment where he is going to feel disrespected because he obviously feels as though he's undroppable. And now that he is droppable, that is a huge punch to the face because he's made it very clear. I've never had this happen in my career. 3 games on the bench. I've never had this happen. If you think about it from an athlete's perspective, egotistically, that is like, whoa. You don't need me? What do you mean you don't need me? Of course you need me. Wait, you still need me, right? Like, do you need me? So I think there's 3 things. If he hadn't have done that, he goes to AFCON. He's with his homies, gets food, culture, lifestyle, experience, playing for the country, playing for the band, the brotherhood of Egyptian football. Maybe gets into a run of form or a confidence level that then comes back and Arne Slot's like, need you, miss you, want you, love you. Let's effing go. Let's go win the Premier League. But now it's, we got this call from Inter Miami. Yeah. Hey, we got this call from Al Hilal. And with 18 months remaining on his contract, is he like Son Heung-min, $20 to $25 million for the purchase to bring him to Major League Soccer? Knowing the history of 3 players that have left Liverpool Football Club, even Darwin Nunez going to Al Hilal, is there a $35 to $40 million offer that then could absorb the pay the wages, and then actually give him a pay bump? All of a sudden, and I said this to Tony Meola, every person is accountable for their actions. There's consequences for whatever action you choose to take. His decision was to do this. Now what he's allowed is the consequences of decision-making behind the scenes that alters the direction of his history with Liverpool. What could have been maintainable and could have been something they could have gotten over now becomes your action so individualistic, now forces the hand of the manager to make a even bigger decision, something that he probably didn't want to make. And ultimately, whether the senior figures at Liverpool knew this was going to happen or not, the moment that Mo Salah finds out he's not going to start seemingly indicates he becomes the dark, stormy cloud within the group that feels as though he's so angry he needs to let off steam. And by doing so, he napalmed the joint. So now, effectively, what's the way back? I'm unsure outside of him leaving the club and the club trying to maximize his current value with 18 months remaining on his deal.
Do you know what? I think that's fascinating answer, because so much of your answer sort of took it from a player's perspective, a contractual perspective, and the business of football perspective, which I think is really interesting. And I agree with all of that, in fact. But I think from a fan perspective, from a Liverpool fan perspective, I would be furious with this. Because, football fandom is, as it's always been, what have you done for me lately? One day you're cock of the walk, next day you're a feather duster. That's the business. Always has been, always will be. Yeah. Father Time is undefeated. And I think that Mo Salah ain't been good enough. And that's the fundamental thing here with this conversation. And one thing that struck me this afternoon, actually, I've been watching snippets of something I'm really keen to see, which is a documentary CNN released this week, which is I'm Chevy Chase and You're Not.
Oh, and
I love Chevy Chase, right? I'm fascinated by the career of Chevy Chase. I'm fascinated by all the interviews from community actors who had a terrible time working with Chevy Chase.
Yeah.
There's the whole Joel McHale thing, and there was a great podcast into last week about their terrible relationship.
TV show,
so interesting. And there's the Bill Murray thing and all of it. Anyway, to narrow it down, there is a bit where Chevy Chase is making Fletch. And he's making the vacation movies, and he's making these incredible movies, one after the other, Spies Like Us,
career,
over and over and over again. Some of my favorite, we got them all on VHS when I was like in the 90s sort of movies. And then at some point he makes Cops and Robertsons. At some point he makes Snow Day. And at some point he's being asked to come back for a paycheck for Caddyshack 2 with Jackie Mason, putting in the worst performance in movie history. And then there's no way back from that. And you either accept your secondary role, and you accept that maybe you need a career change, and you accept that maybe you are now a bit part player in a weird sitcom, and you can make the best of it and sort of work your way back into whatever, or you become a Oscar-nominated actor like Bill Murray became or whatever, or you become a sort of bitter, sort of upset, difficult to get along with character. And that sort of seems the pathway of sort of Chevy Chase. And I'm sort of thinking about that when I'm thinking about Mo Salah, and it's, it happens to every old queen of the stage. Always has and always will. It happens to so many great players from so many sports. There is a point where it's not there. And maybe you can get it back and have an Indian summer in your career. Maybe you go to a lesser club or you play provincial theatre or whatever, and you can build up again from there. And I think Mo Salah, with all the third-person stuff, which I hadn't noticed till you mentioned it, but there's so much reverence for himself here, he cannot see where he is. There's so much reverence for himself, he won't take the right offer. He won't take the good offer because he wants to be the star. It goes back to our friend Paul Mortimer, the former Villa winger I've worked with for a long time, who I love. And I've said this to you quite a lot. He always sees football as stars, co-stars, and extras. And he has been the star for so long. And not just the star. Chevy Chase in Fletch. He has been Chevy Chase in 1985.
Yeah.
And now he's Chevy Chase in 2001. And it's a bit, it happens to all of us. And I just think this is, for that element, I feel like, Dunny, it's a bit of a long-winded way of sort of working out that I don't think he has read the room. I don't think he has read where he is. And I think there is such a great way here of Mo Salah going, look, you know what? Not once in all of this did he say, I've been crap. Not once in all of this did he say, I haven't delivered. And you know what? I'm going to deliver because I'm Mo Salah. And we are ready for Fletch 3, which never got made. And we're not having that.
Changed the entire conversation. If he would have ended it that way, it would have changed. And by the way, not for nothing, it's not like, look at Andy Robertson. Andy Robertson wasn't doing anything wrong starting left back for the Premier League title winners, and outside one bad week, not just him, the entire team, in Cup and Champions League competition, where they ran into the juggernaut PSG, the treble is a very attainable opportunity back then. And Kirkes comes in. It's not like they bought a winger, like an out-and-out winger that said like a Cody Gakpo-esque on the right-hand side that like, hey, man, you lost your position, or at least we're bringing in someone to play your position. This is... And it might not be his fault. Like, honestly, like Trent Alexander leaving and going through 4 different players on that right-hand side, if you had Szoboszlai, to try to figure out the right back conundrum. In the midst of that, okay, we kind of solved the right back conundrum, and then we're going to put Sloboslai back in the middle. But then you think about Gravenberch and you think about McAllister, and where do we put Sloboslai? Well, if we put him in that pocket and we give Mo a rest, maybe we bring Mo off the bench, and how do we do Gakpo or Ekitike and Alexander Isak? He's trying in real time in the midst of 3 wins in 12 matches, or now 4 wins in 15 matches, how to get his best collective unit on the field. And by the way, we were getting messages on the shout line saying, like, what would Diogo Jota have done in a moment like this? He would have put his head down, would have pulled up his socks, and would have got to work. I mean, Jota didn't play as much as he probably wanted to play, but he understood the way he handled himself was so top class, right? So team before individual that Diogo Jota would have never thought about heading to the scrum and having a moan and throwing his toys out the pram in a moment like this. So, again, I was never the player, obviously, that Mo Salah was. The only thing I can relate to is near the end of my career, understanding like Tuesday, Wednesday trainings were kind of worthless if you weren't participating in like your regional Champions League type. And you kind of like, you'd look around and be like, dude, stop running like your ass is on fire. Chill out, bro. Like, it's Tuesday. I always felt like like you get these 17-year-olds like beep 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 beep. Like, dude, I'm gonna knock you out. Chill out. But like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, like I'd start ramping up, and then Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then right back up. That was me. That was and that's physically and mentally. That's why I only was capable of playing at the level I was capable of playing. But there is that ego that's involved where you're like, hold on a second, bro. Like, he might have a different player profile than me that might be beneficial in ways that mine isn't, but I know I'm a better player. I'm a smarter player. I'm technically better. I play balls that guy can't hit. Like, great that he can run, but like he can't really play. He's a donkey. I remember feeling that way over. No, I'm not joking. Like, what? Like, what? What are you talking about? Yeah. So again, it's when you're and Tony Meola and I, Tony Meola ended his career with like 4 months on the bench playing for Bruce Arena, not playing for Bruce Arena. And it was devastating for him because he was still Tony Meola, league MVP, Tony Meola, World Cup MVP, or, World Cup player. And to be in these situations, man, it's a death of ego. And right now, he's not allowing his death of ego. In his mind, he's still elite of the elite, but within the collective, he shows the frailty of the individual, and that's normal. I mean, we saw it with Cristiano Ronaldo and Piers Morgan. I mean, what's the difference? It's that, they had a set, and he called Piers Morgan, and he broadcasted around the world. You don't need to do that nowadays. All you got to do is do what Mo did. Step to anybody's iPhone. Hey, Mo, what do you got? Oh, hey, I want to tell you how much I'm unhappy. Whoop, everywhere.
Yeah. One last bit on this, because I went on some weird soliloquy about Chevy Chase out of nowhere in the last one. But just in terms of the fans and the legacy at the club, because the way you leave a club, it really does matter.
Yeah, it does.
And when you do leave, however you leave, I think there's always going to be some animosity. And like some of the Alexander-Arnold stuff, we referenced him earlier on. We always talk about Declan Rice. We were together when he made his debut in DC for Arsenal. But because of the way Declan Rice did his departure from West Ham, as just the most high-profile example I can think of, when he retires, he is going to get a huge welcome. He's still playing for a rival London club, right? So there's going to be a little bit of about it. When he retires in 10 years, 8 years, whatever it is, Declan Rice will be welcomed back with a huge reception from West Ham fans for what he did in the Conference League team. But when you're still a live, active player, he still gets a reasonably warm welcome. Bit of booing, bit of chanting, but that's the game. That's the banter of it. And Adrian, he told me a great little story this morning on the football show about the fact that when he goes to the new Hill Dickinson, there's like, was it a mural? I think he said a mural, like a ceramic mural of his face and what he achieved with the club. 2-time title winner with Everton. There's a few other guys that are like that. There are other people that have won the title with teams who don't get welcomed back. They don't get remembered. And like, you are a long time retired. And maybe he's never going to come back to England again. Maybe he's going to go and take the Saudi money and live like a king on a yacht somewhere, Ronaldo style, just posting pictures of the abs and that's about it. And being well followed on Spotify and, being a shill for a dreadful country. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. If that's what you want to do, you have the personal freedom to do that. But if he left now, I wonder whether he would be welcome back, considering he's the, I think, the third highest goal scorer in Liverpool history, and I would argue their best ever Premier League player.
Yeah.
If he goes to the Brighton game at the weekend, don't get any minutes when he absolutely shouldn't, and then he's gone during the January transfer window post-AFCON, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not a Liverpool fan, so I don't know. No one's ever been this good for my team, so I don't know. But I think it'll take some time before he's welcome back again.
Yeah, which will be monumentally disappointing, right? Because he was such a vital and instrumental player for everything is, and especially kind of during the COVID phase of how difficult kind of life was for everybody. He was looked at as a guy that was such, such in such a revered status, the support that he constantly had. And anytime, like I can remember even the amount of heat he was catching for posting a blue Christmas tree, for his family and from a religious aspect and all that stuff. So yeah, again, it just goes to show you, man. And I just had this conversation with my oldest boy at the weekend. Your actions have consequences. And even though you might think it's not a big deal, that's not necessarily how things are going to be perceived. And we were speaking to it from a social media aspect, and this inevitably becomes the social media aspect because, I was using the example of like the moment that you post something, the moment that you like something, the moment that, any of you comment on something in a positive way, you are co-signing whatever it is that you're having a conversation about. And it becomes the bigger of the person that you are and whatever the world that you're operating in, it becomes a press conference. It's an impromptu press conference every time you elect to put something out socially. And so for Mo, again, it's exactly what he did a year ago when it came to his contract conversation. It's not as if he's been faultless. The Jurgen Klopp substitution stuff and the green and white jerseys on the sideline years ago was a huge thing that we've kind of brushed over because of his performances. And, at times the body language between he and Sadio Mane and all of these things. So yeah, I don't know, man. It just feels like out of nowhere, a conversation about a January exit for Mo Salah is much more of a reasonable conversation than we ever could have imagined less than 48 hours ago.
Without a massive apology, I feel like it's near a guarantee that it'll be gone in January. The Saudis have wanted him for a long time, and as we know, there's no limit on the funding the Crown Prince will give to sports wash the nation. And just one other quick thing on that, then we'll get to MLS Cup. I think it's really interesting what you said about like the amount of conversations I have now, not just about football, with people who are like, we memory hole things, everything gets memory hole, this happened and we move on, this happened, we move on. It's a societal thing that like things are so fast and the old joke used to be fish and chip paper, but now it's even quicker than that. We've barely eaten the chips and people have moved on at this point. But I actually find it a little bit encouraging that maybe this will be remembered. And I think that we memory hole things too quickly. And I think we should forgive people. And I think if there's an apology from Salah, I absolutely would wipe your mouth and move on this story. But there's something encouraging to me that if you disrespect us, we don't forget it. And that element of that, I don't know, I find that quite encouraging. Anyway, we don't know if that's happened yet. We'll see how it goes. Let's get to MLS Cup. Inter Miami victorious over Vancouver Whitecaps by 3-1. Another Lionel Messi inspired victory for Inter Miami, who arguably Messi has put in one of the most sensational seasons, certainly numbers-wise, anyone ever has in Major League Soccer. His assist for one of the goals was absolutely fantastic. 2 assists in the game, as I've mentioned. He was great. It was a well-deserved victory. You were at the game, Dunny.
Yeah.
Tell us your thoughts. Tell us your feelings. Give us a review.
Yeah, Ocampo being judged for the own goal in the 8th minute. Ali Ahmed at the start of the second half gets the game-time goal around the 60th minute. The injury to Ralph Priso was devastating. Converted attacking player, left foot, dominant, great player profile with speed and athleticism, intelligence, playing as a center back. His partnership with Tristan Blackman, MLS Defender of the Year, was really important because he covered all of maybe the physical deficits that Blackman had upon his return from injury. And then Rodrigo de Paul, in a moment where Kubas, I thought, was fantastic alongside Sebastian Berhalter for Vancouver. The first turnover, I thought Kubas was going to win MVP. I thought if Vancouver won, Kubas would be the MVP of the MLS Cup final. Sebastian Berhalter makes that sliding tackle, averts a breakaway opportunity. Kubas turns the ball over. Messi plays Rodrigo de Paul in. And by the way, Rodrigo de Paul, kids out there, if you're watching this, go back and watch his finish. The way he kind of arcs his body over the ball, he kind of cuts at it to where it makes the ball kind of jump, so the defender or the goalkeeper has no chance about it. And then that final ball from Jordi Alba picks out Lionel Messi in the chest, and a deft little touch up over the top. Tadeo Allende, his 9th goal of the playoffs. He breaks the record for most goals in the playoffs, puts the game to bed in the 90th, +6. There were some big data points. Start of the second half, Falcone on Ali Ahmed inside the penalty area, could have been a pen. The double post of Sabi hits the right post, hits the left post, comes back out. Priso injury. And then ultimately for Sorensen. Jesper Sorensen, phenomenal season as head coach of the Vancouver Whitecaps. And I just wish I could be a fly in the wall and understand that when Priso goes down and Pupe, the first time used center back in the final for the season, comes in, if he could have attached Jaden Nelson to the substitution pattern to give him more fresh legs, more of a punch, more of a stretching of the field, more of a transition moment capability, breaking the back lines. But ultimately, it was a phenomenal afternoon. I was on the sideline with Marcos Ceballos from SiriusXM fame, and to see the speed, the athleticism, the technical ability, the intelligence, to watch the way Lionel Messi played as a false nine, which forced the two center backs to kind of pick and choose, to watch Thomas Muller do the exact same thing where Noah Allen was isolated 1v1 with Brian White, and then all of a sudden Maxi Falcone was really hesitant to step into the midfield because there was just this little pocket off the defensive midfielders, but kind of in front of Maxi Falcone, where he ended up drawing the yellow card, and he's playing on a nice edge because Muller was receiving, turning, and running, or was he getting, snuffed in the tailpipe? Really impressive tactics. I thought Javier Mascherano, with Segovia coming in and Yannick Bright coming in, leaving Luis Suarez on the sidelines, who I had the perfect view. This was an incredible moment. I was talking about this during the broadcast. Luis Suarez was so locked in. And remember, Luis Suarez kicked out at Andy Nahar in the first leg of the Nashville game, got suspended. That meant Salvetti comes in, the $4 million Argentine from Newell's, played at the same club that Lionel Messi started at. So all of a sudden, instead of Suarez, instead of Messi, instead of Allende, then it was Salvetti, Allende, and then Lionel Messi and kind of the false nine. The press looked different. The movement looked different. Dynamism looked different in favor of this group. So because of his, talking about actions have consequences, because of his actions in the kick out to Andy Nahar, he's suspended. Javier Mascherano drops him. They end up figuring out looking differently. They win in Cincinnati. They win against NYCFC. And when push came to shove, he was unused once again. But to see Luis Suarez, and again, wherever you fall in line with him, he's incredibly frustrating because of the dark arts, but yet I love the dark arts. But then when he passes the line, I don't like the dark arts, but I still love the dark arts. To see that ruthlessness of like a player being not used at this stage of his career, to see how locked in he was, to see like how prepared mentally and physically he had made himself to be, in that moment that Yannick Bright is chosen to be the last sub and not to bring in Luis Suarez to see the game out, to watch his body language, he was heartbroken. Wasn't negative, like wasn't like MFing anybody, this is a stone cold killer. Like, this is a winner at every level. This is a guy that will like do everything and like scratch, kick, paw, bite, all those things. Like, I get those are the easy ones, but like to see him understanding where he's at this stage of his career, being unused in an MLS Cup final after what he's done for the club, like stones on Javier Mascherano. The game didn't call for him, so he didn't bring him in. But like to see like the visible like hurt of not being a part of that game was really fascinating. And then subsequently to see the final whistle, for him to drop the emotion of like internal like frustration, rage, disappointment, to go celebrate and recognize, that Lionel Messi lifts a trophy. Busquets and Jordi Alba have played in the final games of their career. The Inter Miami and owners Jorge Mas and David Beckham, this is like the penultimate moment of what they've been building over these last couple of years. To see the fans, and by the way, I would say 60 to 70% of the fans near the final whistle had their cameras up. Like this was like
Yeah.
I was in the building. I was in that moment when Lionel Messi lifted his first MLS Cup trophy. To like be a part of that, it was crazy, man. And then to like watch it all happen on stage, and then like, and this is something that you and I, you've seen, and we've been lucky enough to be a part of. I was on the field, and I've been on the field for a lot of these MLS Cup moments and a lot of these MLS All Star moments. To walk to see the trophy presentation, I'm gonna try to do this justice correctly. And in a moment where we're trying to get all of these interviews, and I'm like 2 feet from Messi, and his bodyguard's massive, by the way. Um, to see a private moment, obviously in public, where they've done the pictures, they've done the celebration, they've gone to the team, they've gone to the staff, they've gone to the owners, they've lifted the trophy, and then they got to be with their family. You got like a group of 15 kids that are all of the children of the players. And then to see just this like physical, emotional moment between like Busquets and Alba. And it was like a very touchy, huggy moment. And it was like, and again, if they're your guys, you're going to love these guys. If you don't like Barcelona, you don't like Spain, you're going to look at them as antagonists and you're going to look at them as villains. I get all that. But to see them with their wives and to see the wives interacting, to see them with their kids and to see the kids interacting, to see Luis Suarez in visible tears being consoled by his wife that he didn't get to play, emotionally drained from that moment, to come over and come together, to see Lionel Messi go up and Antonella and the kids and hug and kiss, and to see Antonella's, she had this smile that she was so proud of Lionel Messi for doing this in this moment. A guy who's won everything, right? Just one more trophy to add to the case. To see all of this, to be on the field and just like acknowledge this, it's pretty incredible, man. Like
Yeah.
I didn't have my phone out. I didn't take pictures. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna like absorb this. And then to watch like David Beckham walk over to the Vancouver Whitecaps team and shake everybody's hand and like clap them as they went on stage. To have that conversation, I got to catch up with Jorge Mas immediately after, the owner of Inter Miami, and I just kind of grabbed him while I think he was like running around with I assume his grandchild. Um, to just have, and like for him to say whatever we're allowed to do, we are going to do. And for him to kind of already indicate that they've got the blueprint to replace a Busquets and an Alba, to think about Freedom Park right around the corner, to capitalize on Lionel Messi, the branding element of those pink number 10 Lionel Messi jerseys. I'm going on a Royal Caribbean cruise next week, and even as I'm going through and updating all of my like my passport information, it's like Lionel Messi, Royal Caribbean, Inter Miami. It's like it's in the background of all of this stuff. Like in that moment, I was sitting back just thinking, I joined this league in 1997. I was the second Project 40 player to ever come before homegrowns, before, anything had to do with Adidas, Nike Project 40, bypassing college, going straight, becoming a pro, to being on teams that, collapsed, to being on Miami Fusion. By the way, standing there on the field and thinking like, my last game for Miami Fusion was losing the semifinal match on a header, a controversial corner that was given, and we could have gone to an MLS Cup. That Ray Hudson was my coach. That the stadium, instead of being this way, the stadium was this way. The training facility is where the AAA Baltimore Orioles baseball field was for their spring training, which we used to then be in the same kind of area where the grass was for these new training facilities for Inter Miami, where, if there was a lightning storm that came, the only reason we ran off the field was because a lightning bolt hit the metal roof on the executive airport that was like 100 yards away. Like I just had this, it was so emotionally and oddly fulfilling for me as a former player in that moment to see how far the league's come. And to see all of these players, and me being a guy in 1995 stumbled across Barcelona when Haji, was the playmaker, and Cruyff was the coach. And by the way, Sergio Busquets' dad was the goalkeeper, and Pep Guardiola was this young, mighty might of a midfielder back then. It was just kind of, for me, it was like a crazy kind of, I don't know how to even verbalize it. Like it was like everything kind of like full circled and came together for all of these little like minuscule, data moments in my brain. But cool nonetheless. And really intrigued to see what the next steps are for Inter Miami, because obviously I think from a negative aspect, we're all kind of thinking about what happens after Lionel Messi. But in
Yeah.
real time, hot damn, rising tide lifts all ships, and Jorge Mas and David Beckham, they did what they said they were going to do. Now I'm excited to see how they take that next step into kind of FIFA Club World Cup, CONCACAF Champions League, Leagues Cup, kind of in the hemispheric region, how they kind of continue to grow the brand Inter Miami, both on and off the field.
I'm glad you mentioned the Miami Fusion history. There was a great piece in The Guardian this morning that I was reading from Alexander Abnos, who was there. I don't know if you ran into him, but it was really excellent piece reviewing the game, and he kind of bundled in the history of 2001 and Ray Hudson and the Fusion being disbanded basically a few months after that game.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you answered that, because I think that was really fascinating. And the other element I wanted to ask you was about Sir David. And what David Beckham has achieved, because I mean that 2001 game would have been 6 years before David Beckham even moved to Galaxy, and of course he got that incredible. I mean the foresight here of Beckham, and let's not say Beckham's people, let's say David Beckham, to get this deal, to get the franchise at a heavy discount, essentially to
$5 million activation cost.
Crazy, but the foresight to do that. When you consider, and I have got a negative later, I've got a secondary question on this, which may well be a negative, which I'd love your view on, but to err on the side of positive and foresight and his sort of vision, people, the amazing thing about David Beckham as well, the cliche of David Beckham in the old days was that he was stupid and he wasn't very bright. And there's a great comedy sketch from Alistair McGowan and Ronnie Ancona when they had this really successful show over here about how stupid the Beckhams were. It was a mega hit when he was a player. And it's just, it's incredible. We would have that perception of David Beckham when he's obviously one of the most savvy people that have ever played football. But give us a little brief but pointed history of the fact that he was able to have this vision, develop this club, have this impact with the various people that he's met, the relationships that he has built with Jorge Mas, as you mentioned, and all these other guys, and then be able to, frankly, manipulate the finances of Major League Soccer to be able to bring in Lionel Messi. But as you say, for the good of all, I think in a lot of ways, there are people in my street in Romford, in Essex, that are wearing Inter Miami kits, and with all the respect and due in the world, they aren't wearing Columbus Crew kits, they aren't wearing Nashville kits, they are, and maybe they should be, whatever.
Not wearing LA Galaxy kits anymore.
Not wearing LA Galaxy kits anymore, exactly right. So give us a little word on what Sir David has actually achieved here, because this is genuinely incredible. I would love to see a documentary on this that wasn't just a airbrushed "don't the Beckhams get on well" documentary. I'd love to see someone really get into the weeds of what was achieved here, because this has clearly been an incredible personal business development of David Beckham's brain, and I'm just. That deserves some credit. I really think it does.
Yeah, listen, I'm of the belief, and I've said this time and time again, David Beckham's decision to join Major League Soccer, and specific to LA Galaxy, and create the Beckham Academy out in LA was a transition moment, a watershed moment for Major League Soccer. And had he not come at the time that he comes, I don't think we're talking about what modern day Major League Soccer looks like in 2025. It put MLS on a rocket ship that wasn't available to them in any other way. The branding, the sporting nature of him being a part of everything, it put eyeballs of Major League Soccer on the map. And there's been struggles, there's been contraction, there's been moving, there's been turnover and all of these things. And the moment that we retired, we understood, and we'd always heard whispers that there was an activation clause in his contract that afforded him an opportunity to start a team somewhere in the United States whenever he deemed reasonable. Now, I had a unique opportunity that I was actually with some people from Major League Soccer the day that he decided to go down to Miami and announce that he was bringing a team to Miami. And a lot of things went wrong. A lot of things went sideways. And as I look back, I wonder if it was very Dave Checketts at Real Salt Lake when he had Real Madrid in Salt Lake City to play a friendly against Real Salt Lake, and figured out this way to construct this pseudo press conference photo op for Real Madrid players with golden shovels to quote unquote break ground on a stadium that was nowhere close to being acknowledged and or existing in Salt Lake, but started the ball rolling with such ferocity that he ended up getting the stadium in the exact same spot where the shovels hit the ground in Sandy, Utah, now where America First Field is. And had he not done that, had he not convinced at the time Ramon Calderon, to put Beckham and company on a bus that next morning, and see visually these guys digging dirt in the ground, would have never happened. And I always thought maybe David Beckham used the playbook of Dave Checketts that day to do something similar down in Miami. But I can remember watching on television these video clips of like Beckham's car rolling out and everybody there and the power of David Beckham, being in South Florida and doing these events, and like didn't feel like the right security was on site and didn't feel like the right things were being put on place. And this was like a David Beckham company type of moment, as opposed to like an MLS driven moment. And subsequently, there was a good 4 or 5 years where we were talking about location and we were talking about neighborhoods and we were talking about potential sites and all of this thing. And it felt like the city of Miami said, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Kind of like what happened in Columbus, Ohio. Like pre-court, I want this land. You're not one of us. You don't live here. You don't have a house. You don't understand the city and the culture and what it takes to build. And the partnership with Jorge Mas and his brother, the Mas brothers, that's when everything started changing, because you aligned yourself with one of the most powerful real estate commercial business people in Florida, not just in Miami, in Florida. So all of a sudden the ball starts to move. And with the construction and the starting date and understanding that Fort Lauderdale was going to be where the Miami Fusion used to be, the easiest place to quote unquote start, because they had already identified the golfing, I'll say, complex where Freedom Park is going to be next to Miami Airport, that it was going to take a long time. They did some ground testing and everything was going sideways on that. So they continue to build. And even in the beginning, Gonzalo Higuain and everybody involved, they did a lot of good things, but they didn't necessarily do it right, to the point where there was significant fines. There was the structuring of the rosters, Chris Henderson coming in to try to settle things down, Tata Martino coming in to try to build the club up. And then all of a sudden the infrastructure, and by the way, pieces of the sporting umbrella with regards to other soccer teams were being invested in and absorbed. So there's like there is a soccer network of umbrella that's being now in place in conjunction with Inter Miami. Then you have the appeal, right? The city of Miami, you have David Beckham, you have the financial flexibility, and then all of a sudden you involve Lionel Messi to all of this. Lionel Messi, then you've got Busquets, and you've got Alba, you've got Rodrigo de Paul, you've got the young kids, Allende, you've got Baltazar, you've got Salvetti, you've got all these kids, right? Maxi Falcone, like Ustari comes, like one of Messi's best friends is goalkeeper. Javier Mascherano shows up. Like all of these things are put into place because you have these massive personalities, these massive Rolodex, and this massive amount of money. So as I'm like, and this is the first time I've really like theoretically started to put this in play in my own head, it comes down to ultimately accountability. And they've succeeded and they've fallen short. They've lifted a Leagues Cup, and yet they had the best season in MLS Cup history, regular season history last year with 73 points. And they lose to an Atlanta United team that, quite frankly, shouldn't even have been there, but found momentum at the right place at the right time. So for this season, for them to win in the manner in which they did, to think about FIFA Club World Cup and really plant their flag internationally, as much as people either think it was a good thing or a bad thing or a made-up thing, the FIFA Club, wherever you fall in line with that, I don't care. All of these things now align with the commercial side. Now the sporting venture is aligning with the commercial success. But again, if you ask me who's better set for next season, I would tell you Vancouver Whitecaps roster is better set for the start of 2026 than Inter Miami's, because Alba and Busquets are no longer going to be with the team. And you've got to figure out what you're doing with Luis Suarez, which I believe you could renegotiate his contract and get him down into a category that means that you have other options to build the best and the biggest and the brightest, and you still allow Luis Suarez to be a part, but now he's got a new role to play, a la the conversation with Mo Salah. So that's the way I would view it. That very quietly, as we look back, and I mean this with all due respect, David Beckham becomes maybe the most important piece of MLS's history that in real time we haven't acknowledged. Because those two moments, the moment of him coming to as a player and then him becoming the owner, I think are two moments that changes the stratospheric nature of growth in Major League Soccer and raises all the tides that lifts all the other ships along.
I think you'll find that Sir David.
Sir David.
One other. Sir David.
Sorry.
You got to say it like that. One final quick one, because I could talk to you about this all day. I think we had two really good topics today, but just one other thing I wanted to ask you, as maybe it's our last MLS chat for a little while. The villain element of Inter Miami. I'd love your view on that, because, you know, we speak to a lot of fans. You speak to a lot of fans, of course, way more than me, who all see Inter Miami as a villain. I have never met an MLS fan who didn't support Inter Miami who didn't think they were the villain of the piece. And, like, give us a view on, like, how they get over that. Do they need to get over that? And look, there's no way around the fact that they have had massive advantages and essentially welfare from the league to grow. I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing, because they have been able to make...
I don't know if that's fair, and I'll tell you why.
Let me just finish the question quickly, because, you know, again, you know so much more about this than me, which is why I think this is fascinating. But there is an element of, like, I try and think about what's happened with Miami, and I try and think about what would happen if, like, I don't know, the Premier League changed the PSR structure because they wanted to bring in, let's just say Lionel Messi for argument's sake, and suddenly Aston Villa don't need to adhere to exactly the same rules as everybody else because it would be commercially successful for the league for Lionel Messi to come in. People would lose their minds. And I know it's not the same because there's so many different, I won't list them all here. There's so many differences why it's not the same. But from a fan's perspective, they're a bit like, well, hold on a minute. Why can't we at Nashville bend the rules to bring in Mo Salah?
Well,
so tell me why that's something.
Here's the thing, that the rules, I disagree, and I know this is more of a nuanced conversation. I know I'm very fortunate because over the years I've become friends with, I've either played with so many players that have become executives, or I've become friends with so many players or so many people that are executives, that I've been able to have conversations that have pulled back the curtain and seen the nuances of the continued nimbleness of Major League Soccer. Because the reality is it's less than 35 years old, right? We're going to go into year 31, 32. So each year there's been adjustments. There's been changes. And by the way, context, in my final season as a pro, I made $120,000, right? If you took my career and say you compared it to a kid like Justin Glad, who's in the prime of his career, 28, 29 years old, same position, effectively same type of career. Neither of us were fortunate enough to make a World Cup team, but we played in all the national teams and played 250 some games in Major League Soccer. 120 grand. He makes $1.6 million. $1.6 million in 20 years' time. So again, the growth of the league, what has happened? Well, you get collective bargaining agreements, you get new investment and ownership groups, the product is better, the product is selling better, you have different television, radio, all of these new contracts that come into play. Adidas comes in, maybe you're going from like Honda to Audi, maybe you're going from like Bud Light to Heineken, right? Maybe, you know, like these type of big adjustments are happening in real time. So the commercial side of the game is constantly evolving, and there's an evolution within the the collective bargaining agreement as well. With all of these negotiations, the players are clawing back more numbers. And that could be from designated players to U22 initiatives. When we had target allocation money, all, you know, the salary cap and budget continues to grow. There's now new ways where you can build, where you can say, in my roster, I'm going to construct it with 2 designated players, and I'm going to have 4 U22 initiatives, and that's going to give me an extra $1 million to spend. Or you can say, like, I'm going to do 3 designated players, and I'm only going to do 2 under 22 players because I'm going to wait. There's so many different ways to construct the roster, and that's why I think we've seen so much parity recently. And by the way, just because you spend doesn't mean you win. Look at Atlanta United, second worst team in the Eastern Conference. So as I try to work my way through that, Miami, they might have got caught in their initial build out with who was in charge behind the scenes, from general manager, sporting director, all of that, for how they built their roster. They were, I think, fined $1.2 million, suspended from going on the market. Chris Henderson, who's now at Atlanta United, did a phenomenal job settling them back in. When people talk about bending the rules, they're not bending the rules for Miami. They're changing the landscape for every team in Major League Soccer. Miami's biggest advantage is that they play in Miami. Just like New York, NYCFC's biggest advantage, they play in New York. LA's are in LA. Chicago's are in Chicago. There's going to be cities that will always have the advantage of lifestyle, culture, and life off the field where people are going to want to be a part of this. When you've built out this roster, what they did with Rodrigo De Paul is nothing different than what they did with Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Is nothing different than what they did with Thierry Henry or Rafa Marquez or Juninho at New York Red Bulls, or what they did with Frank Lampard, David Villa, or Pirlo at NYCFC. It's just a different microscope, a different lens, and a different location. What drives me nuts is that everybody talks about promotion relegation. Everyone talks about going into the idea of aligning with the FIFA calendar. If you would have said to me 3 years ago, does MLS ever go to the international calendar? I go, you're out of your mind. They're never going to. What happens? It's happening in 2027 because all of these owners are becoming not only more and more educated with the idea of what someone else is doing out there in the world that could be beneficial to Major League Soccer, but also you've got NBA, you've got NFL, you've got Major League Baseball. You've got all of these other owners that are coming in from all of these different sporting ventures and saying, hold on a second, let's take a look at something here because it might be beneficial to Major League Soccer. Hey, I might be an investor in a club over in Portugal. What they're doing in Portugal right now might be of a benefit to Major League Soccer. Hey, I own this club in Denmark. They just did this. This might be a huge mistake what the Danish Federation is doing to domestic football. We might want to keep an eye on that because that might not be working. So I think what they're doing, and I'm going to give them credit. And again, I'm going to be looked at as an insider. I'm going to be looked at as being paid by MLS and Apple TV. I get all that stuff. But I'm watching the growth of this, and it's unimaginable seeing what it was when I came in the league in 1997 to what it is now. Unimaginable growth. I am so jealous and so envious of what's happening right now. And as I stood on the sidelines and I watched this game being played, I could never, I played with some great players, some world-class players. I got to share the field and be competitors with some of the most iconic players I could have ever, being on the field with Lothar Matthäus, being on the field with Carlos Valderrama, like MFing these guys. Like, it was brilliant. It was amazing. But to see what it is now and to understand and to have that conversation with Jorge Mas, this is what you want. If you want the thing that MLS can never compete with, Tuesday and Wednesday nights. Can't compete with Champions League Tuesday. Can't compete with Champions League Wednesday. You can compete with Europa League. You can compete with Conference League. And that's the growth and the system and the infrastructure. One of the things I'm most excited about, and I know I'm going long, I'm rambling. One of the things I'm most excited about is next summer. I'm really excited to see the conversations surrounding the infrastructure of footballing facilities, soccer facilities here in the United States. Because you're going to get all of these countries that are going to come in, and they're going to be based in Salt Lake City, and they're going to be based in Miami, like they're going to be based in Kansas City. They're going to be based in all of these different regions. And they're going to see the training facilities. They're going to see the indoor facilities. They're going to see the infrastructure. And then they're going to be training at some of these stadiums that are not going to be a part of the NFL style 100,000 people per stadium event that FIFA is going to want to capitalize on. But they're going to see all of these other things. And you're going to start to understand that very quietly, all of these guys that come from Europe, they're going to be like, holy shit in a handbag. Sorry, Tim. First time I cursed.
Second.
This place is better than what we've got back home outside of the big three in each individual domestic league around the world. So again, I get it. The whole rule bending. Back to your part about villains. I think they lean into it. I had this conversation during the broadcast. If you look at Inter Miami, They've all grown up in CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying. They've all grown up in the 23s. They've all grown up in the 20s, in the 17s that had to qualify for CONMEBOL. They've all played Copa Sudamericana. They've all played Copa Libertadores. In those fine margins of manipulation, what were they doing? They were manipulating the out of Vancouver. Sorry, Tim. Third time.
He's gone now. He's gone. The floodgates are open. The seal is open.
So yeah, I have no problem, and I don't think they have any problem whatsoever. It's nothing different than being, are you Real Madrid, or are you Barcelona, or are you neither of those two? Those guys. Sorry, Tim. But you can still enjoy what they do on the field.
Yeah, I think we are out of time, but I do think we'll definitely talk about this again, because like the fact that a rising tide lifts all boats, the reason that actually does happen in MLS is because it's a very socialized league with no relegation. The lack of no relegation means that any bending of the rules actually does make things better for everyone else, because there's more eyeballs on it. The commercial contracts are better. If you've got relegation, like to my Villa point earlier on, I think there's so much risk in that with you getting the advantage over me. There's £200 million to be lost. And so I
wouldn't disagree with you at all. Can I give you one other data point that I think is really exceptional this year? In 2025, and this is where we talk about jeopardy, and this is where, like, again, it's not promotion relegation, but it's something that I thought had to be something in terms of accountability, that when coaches, when owners really started taking this league seriously, that we were going to see more of. And that was firing coaches. And not sitting on these contracts and letting them like, oh, okay, well, cool. We missed out in the playoffs. See, you know what? Not a big deal. You know, no promotion relegation, whatever. There were 10 sackings this year in Major League Soccer. 10 sackings. Well, sorry, 9 and 1 leaving. I guess 2 leaving if you add Wilfred Nancy. Montreal, Sporting Kansas City, St. Louis, LAFC, DC United, New England Revolution, Atlanta, Colorado, New York Red Bulls, Columbus. And out of those 10 teams, 2 of those teams also sacked their general managers / sporting directors. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a couple of more adjustments heading into the offseason as we're days out of an MLS Cup final. To me, what that suggests is that and I could totally be out of pocket, this is just my opinion, as expansion slows down significantly to the point where, like, we're pretty much capping where the growth is at Major League Soccer, 2 things are going to happen. Number one, those that got in and can no longer compete with the billionaires will start looking for ways out. And that potentially could mean, some ownership, except I wouldn't say ownership, but maybe some relocation of potential teams. And we've already seen, a soccer-specific stadium in Chicago being divested of to be, to use the Chicago Bears downtown with a new owner, like those type of things. But I think the other thing to keep an eye on is, and I brought this up not too long ago with the ownership group in Salt Lake City. In the last 5 years, they've had 4 individual billion-dollar ownership groups. 4. And a lot of those anchors are local billionaires that maybe could have bought a Major League Soccer team for 40 or 50 million, that are now investing in a category of 350 to 400 million, which effectively is the cost of Newcastle United. Now you're also buying infrastructure, you're buying training facility, you're buying training ground, you're buying stadium. And so all of those things start to look a little bit different, but it's still not a Premier League team.
No.
So whatever that model looks like, the fact that you're having 4 different groups that then whittle down to 2 ownership groups, one of my majority owner of the Miller Sports Entertainment, who used to own the Utah Jazz, being the anchor billion-dollar owner here in Salt Lake City, and then having David Blitzer, who is co-owner of Crystal Palace, and he's got an umbrella of teams, and whether you talk about the Guardians, you talk about 76ers, you talk about the Red Devils, all of those things, like he's now a minority investor. I think that's what you're going to see in Major League Soccer. And I think that's where the hot money is going to become. And by hot money, I mean the investment money. Because now all of these guys that don't necessarily want to be builders, don't want to think about academy, apartment complexes, STEM schools, along with the academy build-outs and the second teams, and then the first teams and all of these things, scouting networks and all that. They don't want to deal with all that.
No.
Now they're buying the new house. They're buying the house that's been built for them, and now they want to spruce the house up. I think that's the direction of Major League Soccer and those next steps of evolution, because what we're missing in real time is there's real life development, There's a buying category of 16 to 25 that is looked at as purchasing young players from around the world that are then developing them as assets and sellable assets. And then there's still those global superstars that are being attached to the league at a later stage of their career. And the Rolodex continues to grow. So I'm going to look at it as from a positive angle to see the growth at the end of this year. Intrigued to see what the momentum and the burst is from the World Cup, and understanding that shortened season, that sprint season, whatever we're calling it, from January to June, that then aligns them into the international calendar. I don't know what phase we're in, but I think this next 18 to 24 months is going to be the phase that really continues to transition Major League Soccer into a category that starts to compete with world football without the ability to be in the stars and the lights of Champions League football on Tuesday and Wednesday nights.
I think we're at the end of phase 3, which, to compare it to Marvel, is Age of Ultron.
Okay.
And I think by the time we get to the new calendar, it's full reboot.
Okay.
We're getting rid of the old Superman. Cavill's gone, and handsome Corin Sweat is in. That's where we are.
Got it.
I think that's how it works.
I
don't know. I'll work on that for when we get to the new calendar in 2027. As you can tell, Dunny is locked into MLS this week. And that was fascinating. Thank you. That was really, really interesting. But we are out of time. Well done for surviving this long. If you survived this long, everyone. Good show. Long show. That's Brian Dunseth over there. I'm Tom Rennie. Tim Horsey produced this program. He wasn't here live. That's why all the swearing, hopefully, was cut out. We'll see you next time.